Okay, it is 5 minutes past 9. I feel comfortable to get our session started. So I'm going to start with just our opener. So welcome to today's webinar, which is our, and also this is the first stream, the webinar on empowering women to lead the future of South Africa. And this stream is on business and entrepreneurship. So we're just going to just say thank you for those who've registered and joined today. I hope you're going to gain a lot of value from today's discussion, as we've got some insightful leaders in business joining us today as well. So yeah, we're going to start with a video, just a corporate video on CTU, which represents your host in association with Youth Empowerment. So Yuan, I'm just going to give that over to you to start the video. All right, so while the video was playing, we also had a few more people joining today's session. So welcome to those who've recently joined. You've not missed much. We've just done some openers. We're about to introduce the panelists as well. But just to make a couple of confirmations, again, I'm sure a lot of you have attended webinars before, but you won't be able to use your camera functions, or your mic will remain muted, and that is obviously to reduce any distractions. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, starting with Erik Clear. So please, Erik, just share a bit of insight on who you are, your background, and just based on your expertise as well, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you so much.
Amazing, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erik. I'm dialing in from Somerset West this morning. I have an obsession with leadership and team development. And this means that I end up doing a few things. I deliver keynotes and workshops on how we manage and adapt to change, and how do we build high performance teams in this environment we find ourselves in. I have authored 2 books, written 3 leadership manuals, and then contributed to another 4 books on leadership and business. I have a podcast called The Expansive that I co-host with John Sane. And this podcast is all about how do we live and do business more expansively, whatever that might mean. So we cross many different topics. I have a daily email called The Daily Leader, which is how do we help leaders to be more intentional? Because that's really what everything comes down to. If we want to show up in a different way in this world, we need to be intentional about it. And it's so easy to default to autopilot. So the Daily Leader is this prompt every day to focus on how you can show up in a better way. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, is I'm a dog dad to 2 German Shepherds.
Oh, fantastic. Dog people unite. Janine, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to everybody that is connected this morning into our panelists. I'm Janine Jacobs. I am part of a great financial institution in South Africa, been part of that institution for the last 18 years. My role is a people and culture executive. So I oversee people strategy, make sure that, from leadership effectiveness, everything is in place, and then really ensure that we're able to unlock our people to perform at their optimum in the workplace, and really craft strategies to set them up for success. My background is clinical psychology. Apart from that, outside of work, I also lead a women's MPO called Whole Women. And the focus really is just on women empowerment, the ability to set women up on their various journeys, whether it's entrepreneurship, and really just getting to this element of wholeness to be able to live in who we are supposed to be. I'm also a mom of 2 girls, 2 amazing girls. So I'm really loving women, even the dog is a female in my home. So women all around me, was raised by strong women as well. Married to an amazing husband. And so just living a full life intentionally, and ensuring that we're able to contribute and meaningfully give back to the communities in which we serve.
Thank you so much, Janine. Kimberly, over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kimberly Taylor. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Loop. It started in my 3rd year at university. I was studying chemical engineering, and I was super interested in route optimization, and that's what really led me to build this piece of technology that's now helping companies around South Africa and even outside of South Africa, helps them manage, scale, and optimize their delivery operations. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much. Lydia, you're next.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to have conversations with all of you this morning. I'm Lydia Rue, and I represent a few companies today, starting off with Future Africa Services. That is the old Talent Management Solutions, which is a training institute, and we focus specifically on leadership skills development and women empowerment. So this, for the past 30 years, has been part of my life, has been part of my passion that I live, is to make sure that we give women the opportunity to have a seat at the table. So for me, I'm extremely passionate about that. I've authored 2 books as well on leadership, and one on health, which is the other company that I represent, which is NutriFit Studio. And for me, it is so important. And over the years, I suppose you learn and you get wisdom, learn that the emotional connection and the mental well-being of your board and your executives and the people in your office that work with you is equally as important as the skill set that they bring to the table. So for me, to balance those two are really, really important. So NutriFit Studio focus on eating habits, on mental wellness, and linking into that is Gen X, which is a heart passion of mine, which is the female menstrual cup, where we tap into the CSI fundings of organizations and we go and distribute this 100% medical grade silicone menstrual cup in the disadvantaged areas and communities for our women. And we just thought, starting there, where we know women, girls miss about 63 to 65 school days per annum because of their period. And I know it's a very sensitive subject for some, but it is a hard subject for me, because if we talk women empowerment, we've got to start with the youth. And linking into that is the networking of us as females. So bringing into the equation here is Human Capital Collective, which is an organization where we partner with mind-like people, not necessarily only women, but people with expertise in different fields, and we network and we pass business around. If I get a connection here or an inquiry and I can't service, I send it to Carlin or I send it to Kimberly, and so we connect women and people in business. For me, that is really, really important. And so over the years, focusing on a holistic approach to women in business. And yes, I'm married to my school sweetheart for over 14 years, giving away my age here. Blessed with two beautiful daughters that are very much part of our Human Capital Collective situation. And then also a grandmother, I might add. Very proud granny.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lydia. That was inspiring. Over to you, Dr. Ryan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Noach. I'll keep the introduction brief, just to say I'm the CEO of Discovery Health. And I think my contribution today is really inspired by the fact that I have a majority female workforce and majority female executive team. And I'm really driven and inspired by very powerful women that I work alongside every day that have succeeded in their respective fields and that add enormous value, not only to our business, but more broadly across South Africa to many, many people that benefit from their capabilities. Thanks for including me.
Thank you so much. And then finally, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Caroline. Hi, everyone. My name is Sitembile Ngobese. Currently, I'm Director of Corporate Affairs and Sustainable Business for Unilever, Southern Africa. I think I have over 22 years experience in the communications field, specifically looking into public policy and PPP. But I think a biggest passion of mine has been in 2013, I left corporate and I went into being an entrepreneur. And I worked in the Northwest Province where I was working with 120 entrepreneurs, including women. So this has been one of the most interesting things that I've done in the township and villages. I'm a mom of 4, 3 boys and 1 girl, and I'm excited about the topic today. Thank you very much, Colleen.
Thank you so much. I'm also quite excited about this topic. A lot of what some of you have said have actually reminded me, I don't know if you guys remember, but our Miss Universe from 2019, Zozibini Tunze, said that the one thing that we need to be teaching women in South Africa, well, in the world, is leadership. And I kept thinking about that while you guys were talking. So I really think that this is what today's conversation is going to be about. All right, I think that's all our panelists. So I'm going to open the conversation again, just for those who've just joined the session. We are talking about empowering women to lead the future of South Africa, and our stream today, or this morning specifically, is business and entrepreneurship. I'm going to open the conversation, and we're going to open each conversation. It's open. Any of our panelists can join in. Some of them are specific. And we also like to encourage our attendees to use the chat room if you have any specific questions for our panelists. If the questions relate to our topics and can contribute, we'll definitely raise them and address them. All right, so the first topic that I'd like to start with that we can discuss is the access to financial assistance which has been one of the greatest barriers preventing a lot of women starting their own businesses. So what I'd like to discuss is why is this and how do we overcome it? So basically, in other words, why are women perceived to be at a higher risk when it comes to getting loans, and how do we change this perception? So who'd like to weigh in on this one? Originally, one of our panelists, Zanele Jafta, would have contributed to this one, but she's currently having technical issues.
I was hoping our colleague from the banking profession would be able to shed some extra light, but let me share some thoughts on this. Not that it's my area of core expertise, but having read up a bit on this, it's really interesting to me, fascinating, to report that according to the World Bank, only 37% of women actually have a bank account. And when you look at men with bank accounts, that stands at actually 48% in the same research. So there is strong data-driven evidence that shows that women do not have the same bank account penetration. And the key question, of course, is why. And in this report by the World Bank, they talk about supply side and demand side constraints. On the supply side, it really is a requirement. It's as a result of credit rationing and collateral requirements, or the lack thereof, that play a huge role in discouraging women from applying for credit. But the one that I found really interesting in this credit discussion was the demand side issues. It's quite astounding that the same research showed that self-confidence and the belief of women that they would qualify for credit was materially lower than in men, notwithstanding the fact that when they were credit tested, they were equally creditworthy. So in other words, in simple terms, women simply are believing that they would not qualify for credit when men in an equal position who are equally eligible for credit believe that they would. And this is really a point about self-belief, self-confidence, my capability to achieve creditworthiness, or for that matter, to achieve success. And for me, there was a resounding message for women here, particularly within this stream of business and entrepreneurship, which is to believe in yourself and to really put yourself forward, realizing that women's inherent go-to instinct is actually to hold back relative to men, certainly based on this study by the World Bank.
Absolutely, yes, and just to also confirm, Zanele Jafta, who is from Nedbank, is having trouble joining today's session, so perhaps when she does enter, we can maybe address it again. But thank you so much, Dr. Ryan, for that. Let's move on to the next topic, which I think this is where Kimberly and Sitembile can weigh in, is gender biases in business and entrepreneurship, which I'm sure some of us have experienced on either a regular basis or continuously. So basically, the question is, do women still face nuanced challenges when starting companies other than what men do? Please share your insights on this.
Kimberly, do you want to go first, or I can take this one?
You go first, and I'll maybe just add to what you're saying. Happy to add. I think it's an important.
Women have been marginalized because of patriarchy. We know this, and Black women in particular. Women are still in the minority when it comes to running businesses. We know that more than half of population today is women, and according to MIWE research, women make up only 9.4%, I think, business owners, making us 45th in the whole world when it comes to female-run companies. So having worked in the township and village space, I have come to understand that women's economic participation continues to be hampered by real perceived lack of opportunities, such as culture and social beliefs. I mean, there's a lot of cultural things that happen. I mean, in my experience, I had more women participating in the project I referred to in my intro, which was the retail economy for the township and the villages. And they came through because they wanted to start businesses because they were at home. But most of the people that had to leave the project were women because they had real problems and issues that they needed to address at home. So the labor market continues to favor men, both in the private sector and I think in the informal sector. And it's about time that we try as a country or as a people to address these issues that are so pertinent and important to growing the economy. So I think it's important for us to make sure that we put this topic on the agenda and continuously try to advocate for women and see what needs to be done to make sure that women are skilled and women are given the positions that they qualify for.
Absolutely.
And maybe just adding to that point, I think the topic of biases and stereotypes that exist, I think are really important to talk about, because when we're aware of them, it almost helps to dismantle them in some ways. And so I can speak to my journey in building a business, and it's so funny, you know, I think these narratives exist where in one trait, we will see a man having that trait and we will applaud him for having that trait. And when a woman has that trait, we find it quite, you know, we're not as aligned to it. So, and I think about being assertive or confident, right? Men will be applauded and it will be amazing if they have that trait, where sometimes as women, we're thought to be, it comes across aggressive. But what I found in building a business is that some of these traits are really important. It's important that we're assertive, that we're confident when we're going about building a business, negotiating, and almost understanding as a woman, for me, just because someone is uncomfortable with my assertiveness doesn't necessarily mean I am doing something wrong. So it's almost, it's almost I've had to re-understand these narratives and biases that exist in my world, where women need to be polite and be gentle and are pleasers. These biases really are just important to dismantle. There's another really cool study that's been helpful for me to understand. There were these two professors that took the study about, I think it was Heidi Roizen, I think that was the name of the entrepreneur. And these two professors, two completely different universities, did a study, and they gave the students the whole story about this entrepreneur. Except in the one university, they changed it to Howard. And it was the exact same data, and people were, the students were so much more uncomfortable and with Heidi's success compared to how they I can't think of the right word, how they reacted to Howard's success. And I think that's also another thing that even I have had to dismantle, right? My bias towards my uncomfortability with women succeeding. These biases exist in men as they do in women. And so I love this topic because I think it's really important that we call these things out, that we continue to kind of break them down in our own lives first before we expect, I guess, to break them down, other people to break them down.
Absolutely, and I think in a way, a lot of our women are haunted by history still because of the role we used to play, and for a very long time as well. And I agree with what you said, that opening the conversation, constantly talking about it, sharing experiences will slowly but surely chip away at that perception and replace it with a new one. But it's going to take time. But I agree, the more we talk about these things and the more honest we are about it, the more we can bring it to light. So definitely very important topic to continue with as well. The next one.
Can I ask Kimberly a question?
Please go.
I was recently part of the Bold Women Awards for Veuve Clicquot. And obviously what they do is they celebrate female entrepreneurship across the world. So they have the Bold Women Awards in many different countries.
Yeah.
And what was not surprising, but very consistent across all of the candidates was that they mentioned at some point they had to change how they showed up. They had to become or embody more male stereotypical character traits. And so I'm wondering, in your journey in starting your business, do you feel like you've had to do the same? And what has that been like? Has it been kind of going over to the more male-dominated side and then pulling back into femininity, or what has that journey been for you?
Yeah, I absolutely. I love this topic because I think it's important, and I'll tell you why I love it, because I think sometimes we focus too much on like the female side, but actually what's powerful is both, right? The masculine traits as well as the feminine traits, they are both equally powerful and important in business. And absolutely, I feel like sometimes I step into more of a masculine energy or masculine traits, right? And those are important, right? We learn, like, I look at, you know, my male business friends, right? And they have such important qualities that I try to embody when I'm stepping into maybe, I don't know, whether it's a negotiation or having a hard conversation. It's like those qualities are not something to be afraid of. They're something to you know, pull into and embody. Just like men, I guess, could also sometimes embody those more nurturing, potentially feminine traits when it comes to stepping into a leadership role. And so just to answer your question, 100% I've had to do the same thing. But I almost embrace it and honor it, right? Like honor the fact that and I always say, just give yourself the permission to perform. Give yourself permission to step into sometimes a role that's maybe more masculine, maybe more feminine, and you step back, right, into then after what feels more natural after that. But thanks for the question. I do love that topic.
I think if I may come in as well, I think what is important and what I have experienced certainly in coaching, because I do a lot of executive and strategic business coaching, and finding my woman coachee sometimes being very hesitant to step into a particular role or tackle a specific topic. You know, how do I do that, Liz? You know, this is unfamiliar territory for me. I know I'm assertive, but will I not come across as a bully? How do I then carry myself in that situation? And to both of your points, Eric and Kimberly, I think the more we talk about this and the more we explore that it is okay, you know, we will always be mindful of our approach. I think that is just a trait that we all have in business, whether it's male or female. You're very mindful of how you approach certain topics. And the message I hope hits home today with many of the females in the group today is, it is okay. It is okay to ask those tough questions. It is not about what you ask, it is about how you do that. You know, you can remain feminine, you can remain in control, and you can still ask those very tough questions. And that's where the skill of communication comes into play. I think, Janine, yeah, you would also be able to add a lot of value here. But I think that is where, how do I communicate that? How do I read my audience? And, you know, employing NLP techniques, looking at the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic approach that people apply, can certainly add so much value to your own world going forward. So yes, you know, that stereotyping of should I, shouldn't I, and very often women around the table sit for the best solution, but having that fear of rejection hinders her from putting up her hand and say, hi guys, what about X, Y, and Z? So yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to hear, Kimberly, your approach to it as well.
Definitely a loaded topic, I believe, because again, this is all about how women are perceived still, and I think how we can slowly but surely either change that through our experiences, especially someone like you, Kimberly, who's had to start a business and face challenges with regards to this as well. Guys, I'm actually going to move on. I know that we've got a specific structure of topics, but I actually want to go to the fourth topic, which is, and I think, Dr. Ryan, I'd really like your weigh in on this one, especially when it comes to mentors and role models in the workplace. So the corporate space in South Africa is, as we know, largely dominated by men still. And basically this topic is about how does this have an effect on women when it comes to finding role models or mentors, because being you know, the more dominating gender in this regard, we tend to lean towards men for guidance. Obviously not everywhere, not always, but if we look at the statistics, this is likely the case. So I'd like to get your opinion, and then maybe also Lydia and Kimberly actually. So yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Colleen. The starting point is always, from our point of view, to consider the data and be grounded in the data in considering solutions. So according to Stats South Africa in 2021, of total employment in South Africa, 43% of people in employment were women. And in managerial positions, 66 were men compared to 33% women. So clearly across our population, there's a 50-50 distribution between men and women. So there is a disproportionate representation of women in the workplace based on that 43%. And secondly, and more importantly, there's a disproportionate population of women in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at our own business, it doesn't look anything like that. And maybe that's because we're in a healthcare business. And in healthcare, women do tend to succeed. But in our business, almost 70%, just over 69% of all our employees are female. And in our leadership teams, it's at 60% actually that are all female. So our business, breaks the mold. And I ask myself why, and whether, related to your question, does it have anything to do with mentorship or role modeling? I mean, I think the one issue is that sector by sector, women will tend to excel in more sectors than others. And in healthcare, nursing has always been characterized by a female matron or a female carer who's able to demonstrate empathy and compassion way beyond that of a male carer. Now, that's a stereotype that I'm not convinced is true, but it does tend to attract women to the healthcare profession. So I think segmentally, or from a sector perspective, we've got an advantage. But I do think that it's also about the message that leaders put out into the business, that in an environment which offers human characteristics, which demonstrates the ability to care for leaders and care for staff, women feel much more comfortable with being employed, and more so than that, with achieving senior rank or senior positions in a business, where they know that a business is human and understands some of the responsibilities that women have that typically, not always, but typically men don't have. They call it the second shift of work. Women typically need to be able to put food on the table or look after kids. And as a result, the life orientation of their work lives is much more difficult to balance traditionally than for men. And employers, I think, need to accept that women are capable of achieving just as much as men in leadership, but may at times require more flexibility and adaptability in the workplace. Now, what's pretty interesting to me is that emerging from COVID-19, there's kind of a new characteristic of leaders that wasn't typically as important prior to COVID-19, and that is human leadership, humanity, the ability to be empathic, the ability to understand flexible work needs, the ability to accept and deal with people's human difficulties and tragedies in their life, and at the same time function in a workplace. And my anecdotal experience is that women are much better at dealing with the human side of leadership than some men. And somehow it does come with an estrogen-driven ability to be far more compassionate and caring, and that is the traditional nurturer that women do represent. Now, it's not a rule, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but it is a broad generalization, and something that we glean in our team from the women in our team every single day. That's what they bring to the party. Mentorship is remarkably successful. Linked to your question, I was looking up some detail on mentorship. Of people with mentors, 97% of people vote that it's a valuable asset in their leadership journeys and something that helps them develop great leadership skills. But 63% of women in the workplace have never had a formal mentor. So clearly, considering how valuable it is and the fact that there's such a gap in mentorship, one of the things I think we could all do, and everybody participating here, is seek to allocate mentorship. Now, it doesn't happen informally. It doesn't just happen automatically. It takes a conscious process an organized program, structured training, by the way. One needs to be trained in how to be a mentor and how to be a mentee. And as I always say with the people I mentor, you almost need a contract around success. You need some agreement around how the mentorship program is going to work. Simple stuff, how often we're going to meet, you know, what the homework is going to be, the basis of the engagement, but then also more complex stuff about what the key areas of focus are and what would determine success of any mentorship environment. And so I think mentorship and role modeling is critical in this context. And I think we've got to work to the strengths of a diverse team in every environment.
I'm curious to maybe get some input from the rest. In my personal experience, entering the workforce, I would say almost, well, more or less 15 years ago, most of my mentors or role models have been men in leadership roles, directors, CEOs, executives, and only recently, I would say 15 years later, that has shifted to women, which is interesting to me. I'm curious to know if you've experienced the same, maybe the ladies in today's discussion, and if times are changing, maybe it's a generational thing, maybe because of the millennial workforce becoming older, moving into managerial positions, this might be changing as well. So from a mentorship or role model side, I agree. It's been something that's really helped my career. It's something that I think is crucial and vital, especially if you want to become a leader. But what is interesting to me is if we are seeing a change, or if this is still a challenge that most of female workers coming in with leadership potential, are they still being guided or mentored by men, or is it changing, or should it be changing? That's just something I'd maybe like to open that conversation.
If I may, coming back, I mean, this is a topic very close to my heart, and I agree with Dr. Ryan totally here that the absence of coaching and or mentoring in the workplace can be felt deeply, and specifically females in this role. And to your point, then, Colleen, as well, you know, for me, there's nothing wrong with having a male coach or a mentor. Absolutely, let's not shoot that down, because there is wisdom. There is a balance of scale when it comes to coaching and mentoring, and so bringing the female coaching into the process is just bringing a new dynamic into play, which is really crucial. And I find that it's the balance of the scale. Yeah, whether for me, whether I coach a male or a female, they both get the benefit of the balance that they bring to the table. So it is really one of those topics where, you know, in the past, the imposter syndrome, specifically in women, was a very big thing. Am I really good enough? Can I do this? Should I do this? Won't people think that I am an imposter in pretending that I can do? And that was a very, very real thing in coaching. So for me, the most important part in coaching and mentoring is going back to being authentic. You know, who am I? Because in any leadership role, people follow you because of who you are and how you lead. And so being real, being authentic, and from there, building onto the skill set that is important is really crucial to your own success as a woman. Because so often, you know, a seat is created around the table for women. However, they still try and pretend, if I say that in inverted commas, to employ characteristics that is not true to them. It is part of what they've seen our male counterparts do and exercise, and that gave them success in the past, but that sometimes doesn't work for them. And that is where, for me, the authenticity comes into play. And opening up, you know, the coaching and the mentorship part is crucial to the success of women. And that brings us to the networking part, which is equally as important. Because if we as women, if we're not going to network in business and help one another up rather than pull one another down, we're also not going to succeed in this process. So, you know, that networking is important. And then Dr. Ryan touched on the work-life balance. To me, that's crucial. And one good thing that came from COVID is really the fact that it opened up our eyes and our way of doing and conducting business, where the female can be at home, she can conduct her meetings and still be the mother to her baby child. So, it's all of those new things that came into play that is so exciting in this new era of doing business. And for me, focusing on the networking is crucial, as I say, and then the access to mentorship and coaching. As females, we should put up our hand and say, Mrs. Leader, please may I have a business coach? Ask for it. And I'm not talking about life coaching. That is a very different topic by itself. But I'm talking about business coaching. Somebody that can be your sounding board. Somebody that is not afraid to say, Caroline, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Ask the question so that, that clarity in your own mind can be created instead of telling, but asking, so that we learn through our own mistakes and learn through our own journey. To me, that's crucial in the process of leadership.
Absolutely. So anyone else would like to weigh in on this conversation?
Yeah, I had a few. Go for it, Kimberly.
So I'll add one quick point, because I think Dr. Ryan and Lydia really touched on everything I wanted to say. But it's interesting. I completely agree. When I started, I actually looked for female mentors when I started my business, and it didn't feel as accessible then. But interestingly, I had an incredible, Damien McCann was my mentor basically throughout my business. And now I have a business coach who's also male. And I've actually found the most success in working with men who have very opposite traits and different ways of thinking to me, because I'm quite a feminine leader in a lot of ways, and almost they are my conscience and sense checking. I sometimes will feel I'm being quite emotional, and they'll say yes, but that's also a good business decision for these reasons. So I find the polarity for me of working with male business coaches and mentors has been really helpful, actually, in me not making maybe some mistakes along the road. So maybe just that there, I wouldn't shy away from male mentors.
Caroline, if I may just weigh in here very quickly, and apologies, I dropped off for a second there. I think for me, what's so important for us to understand is what value does mentorship add versus what value does coaching versus where do I need career sponsorship. And I think in my career, it was important for me to understand in what season of my career or in my journey do I need a mentor, somebody that is there for guidance, that I can go to, that is my conscience, and really get some advice on what do I need to do from my next step perspective. And then in what season do I need coaching? And, is it technical coaching that I need, or is it coaching in other dimensions of building some competencies and capabilities? And also understanding that in the journey, I need sponsorships. So it's important for women to understand that there's mentors that you need on your journey, there is coaches that you will need, but there are also sponsors that you will need. And those can be male and female, and embrace the diversity that male and female bring to you, because it's important. We need it along our journey as well. So just make sure that you are very clear on those differences that brings, and really embrace it and use it along your journey.
Absolutely. Eric, I think you wanted to add something to this.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to actually be summarizing what everyone else has said anyway. But one thing I was wondering is that stats around 63% of women that have never had a formal mentor. I wonder what the breakdown of that looks like in terms of structurally, it's not provided versus what we spoke about earlier, this lack of self-belief in terms of asking for it. And I think Lydia touched on that. It's like you have to also, maybe men in some ways, ask for mentorship more because they believe that they are entitled, or they want it for them to succeed. So I'm just wondering if there's a You know, if we had to break that down, what would it look like? And then yesterday I was watching a TikTok about this divorce lawyer, and he was going through all the reasons why people get divorced and what he ends up seeing in his practice most of the time. And the one thing he said is that one of the biggest disservices we did to people was to talk about soulmates, and this idea that one person should fulfill all of your needs perfectly all of the time. And it's absolutely impossible. And I think it's just the same thing with mentorship. And a few people have now mentioned this. We need blended mentorship. We need someone who is male, who has a certain energy, a certain outlook on the world. We need someone who's female, who has a certain energy, a certain outlook on the world. We need someone who is a few steps ahead of you in terms of your progression, and we need someone who is very far ahead of you in terms of your progression. And bring that all together, I think, gives you the best shot, the best perspective on where you're at and where you're going.
Absolutely. I just want to say again, this is why these conversations are so helpful, because I think a couple of things that I took from what everyone's just said is how important mentorship and coaching is still and will always be, that we need to embrace diversity from the male and female side, and that definitely there are opportunities where I think women can just start, you know, like you said, asking for it. Perhaps that's maybe what can improve those statistics, but the more we can see about it, the more we'll be able to know. The next, before I move on to the next topic, I actually want to encourage our attendees just one more time. If you guys want to ask any questions to one of our panelists, or there's something you'd like to weigh in on, please use the chat room. It is there for you to engage with us. Otherwise, we'll continue on to the next one. So I think this one, Janine, is very much in your playing field. And this is with regards to also something that was brought up, was the working from home. So obviously this has changed the nature and world of running business, especially since COVID hit us. Would you say it's harder for women than it would be for men to work from home? And if so, why? And if not, why?
Well, thank you, Caroline, for that question. You know, working remotely or working from home, which is obviously empowered by our digital platforms, I believe has truly been a gift. There was working from home before COVID, but I think COVID actually just accelerated it. And there are so many benefits for not just females, but for individuals working from home. We know we all love commuting less to work. There's more autonomy. We talked about the flexibility. We spoke a little bit around, you know, the work-life integration that it brings. And some studies have even shown that there's higher productivity and increased motivations for people that work from home. And if you think about entrepreneurs, that reduced need for office space absolutely is crucial. But I think we cannot ignore the complexities that working from home presents to our females, to our women. We understand that, you know, working from home, women often carry the majority of the household responsibilities. There is still this subtle but strong belief and expectation that women will parent, women will raise the children while the man works. If we think about some of our rural areas, this is often passed down to the next generation. Like the oldest daughter often is given the responsibility of the childminder. And if we look at some of the data around who is performing most of the domestic labor, some of our surveys are still telling us that 49% of women reported doing the household work, like the cleaning, the laundry, on an average day, while only 19% of men report doing the same. So what does this mean? It means that women have less time to commit to growing the businesses. Women have less time to commit to effectively show up in their working environment. In some of our corporate spaces, we still see that gender or being a parent have played a role in our females being denied or passed over for a raise, a promotion, or a chance to get ahead. And it's also possible that employees who who primarily work from home. If you're out of sight, you're out of mind, so you get fewer opportunities for recognition or advancement. And I think those are still the prevailing challenges that make it harder for women to work from home. And so it's therefore, it's important for us as women, or for women that run businesses, to strategically plan and invest in a support system. We always say that, set up a support system that you create more capacity, and you're free to grow your career, you're free to, grow your business, and you're free to invest the time that you are able to overcome these complexities as a woman working from home. So I think it's still that scale where it comes with its benefits, but there is definitely some complexities that we have to navigate and make sure that we are able to solution for as women.
Can I add something here, Colleen?
Of course.
I must say I'm feeling torn on some of the work from home conversations at the moment. And if you read the latest research by The Economist published in their magazine, or in their publication 3 weeks ago now, the shine is really coming off some of the work from home opportunities. It seems very clear that there is an erosion of culture when people work virtually versus in the office. And I think that has material implications to any business, particularly a business like ours, where we are culture and values driven. In addition to that, and Janine did make reference to this, but it's worthy of repeating, there's a bit of this out of sight, out of mind issue that's developing with the work from home syndrome, where people who are not in the office are missing out on developmental opportunities, missing out on exciting project opportunities. They're almost forgotten in their productivity at home on day-to-day stuff, but not given the opportunities that are a little bit outside of the norm. We're seeing a global trend now of a move back to office in the main, big sweeping move. One of the very big banks very recently insisted that 100% of their staff here in South Africa all return to the office by the 1st of this month, the 1st of August. So they're all back. And I'm convinced that some of the presenteeism and absenteeism issues are exacerbated by work from home environments. During COVID-19, it was a necessity. It worked extremely well in all environments, particularly in our environment. But I think it's horses for courses, and I'm not sure that it is a long-term solution. I do believe in adaptability and flexibility. I think we do need to have flex, particularly for working women. So the CEO of our African health insurance business, a very high-performing executive, very busy executive, she leaves the office at 3 o'clock every day, as almost an understanding with our leadership team, and spends the afternoon with the kids and does homework and does other responsibilities, but is back online in the early evening and is as productive, if not more productive, than many of our other executives who stay in the office until 6 in the evening. So it's certainly not about clock watching, and I'm not saying that one should become a clock watcher. I think the flexibility is critical, but presence in the workplace for social connectivity, for social adhesion, for meaning in the workplace, for visibility is critical. And I've become strongly of the view that permanent work from home, even if it suits a woman for the reasons Janine was setting out, is actually not in their best interests from a developmental point of view.
And from a visibility point of view, I think something you pointed out strongly, and Janine mentioned it as well, is that out of sight, out of mind problem. Compared also or coupled with the fact that we don't always raise our hands or experience imposter syndrome. So yeah, interesting that you've added to that. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one, specifically with regards to work from home and the women's experience in that?
Yeah, I think, Colleen, just to add in, I mean, I was very impressed with the International Women's Day topic for 2023. They were focusing on equality and equity. I think that employers need to be intentional in terms of achieving fairness and acknowledge that as individuals, perhaps as employees, they may need to experience and receive something different, not equal, for you to be successful. So when we become intentional in terms of the equality and equity conversation, we become clearer how we respond to certain needs, particularly for women working from home or even in the boardroom. And the issue of imposter syndrome still exists, and it's huge. So I think it's an issue of just we understand that there's a lot of foundational concepts in diversity work that will continue to take place, but to be intentional in terms of how we address some of the issues, looking into equality and equity.
For sure, for sure. Anyone else want to add on to this one?
If I may, I think what was said now is so important because, you know, looking at where we are currently as a workforce and looking at women in business, the diversity, and I'm not talking cultural diversity, I'm talking diversity that is on the table is certainly something that we need to look at, that we need to consider. And going back, looking at work ethics, you know, I think the work ethics of women is really outstanding. Not saying that men aren't. The topic is women. So the work ethics is there. If work needs to be done, you get down and you do what needs to be done in order to make it work. So I think, you know, from that perspective, to make sure that we all understand exactly where we stand, what is expected from a workforce perspective, and building that strong relationship within the team. And I think, you know, the team topic, which probably will come up a bit later, is how effective can we then still be in building those high performance teams? Looking at the equality, looking at the working from home scenario, can we still do that? And I'm a great believer that we can. I'm not saying we should work from home 100% of the time, all the time, but there is certainly value in the fact that, you know, I don't have to sit in traffic for 3 hours of a day. I can get onto my laptop at 7 o'clock in the morning when the kids are dropped off at school. I can be extremely productive in building high performance teams and in making sure that I put on the table what is expected from my KPAs and KPI perspective. So it's a very interesting topic, and I think one that we will continue to unpack as we go through the next couple of months, 18 to 24 months, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and I think what's true here is each of these topics we can actually spend hours on because there's so much to unpack and to look at, especially if we start looking at stats as well. And Lydia, I'm actually going to merge what you said into the next topic, which is how are women essential in creating high performance teams in a company? Obviously, women have unique and certain traits that are different from men, and we can maybe unpack that to how they contribute to high performing teams in the company. And this is a topic open to, I think, everyone in this conversation. So yeah, who'd like to weigh in on this one? Or let's get started with the first person.
Yeah, I don't mind kicking us off. Lydia, go for it.
No, Eric, you go.
When I assess a team that we're going to be working with, we usually look at 3 dimensions. So the team environment, coordination, and communication. Broadly speaking, those are the most important things to look at because that's the 80-20 of teamwork. Teamwork is very complex. Performance is very complex. So if we want to boil it down to what are the few things we can do that's going to make the biggest impact, then team environment, coordination, and communication, those will be the most important things to focus on. And out of those 3, the most important one ultimately is going to be your team environment. You know, when we try and create a high performance team, we often think structure first. So what are the things we need to do that's going to create a high performance team? We don't think, what does it feel like to be a part of this team? How do we create the environment first out of which those behaviors can flow? And I think if we then sit with that question and we ask, well, what is it that we want from a team environment? What is the ideal team environment? I think it's ultimately an environment where we have psychological safety, where we feel supported, where we feel heard, we feel seen, and we feel like we're part of a unit. And so, of course, like once you listen to that, it becomes quite clear that having women in the team is going to create more of that, more of us feeling psychologically safe, more of us being heard, seen. And research has shown this over and over, right? That women are better at creating and maintaining interpersonal relationships. They have a higher degree of social sensitivity, which, by the way, I think a lot of that is lost when we do remote work. It strips a lot of the human side out of work. So, but when we get together, you know, those things become felt, they become very tangible. And so when we have women in the team, they bring these interpersonal skills to the table. What this ultimately gives us is a higher level of cohesion in the team. And once we have that, you know, this team environment creates the foundation from which we can focus on all the other activities that we need. But it all ties back into this idea, and I know we'll also talk about this at some point, of psychological safety. And so once we focus on the team environment, out of that, everything else can flow. I'll always remember this quote that said, a bad system will always crush a good person. And so you always want to focus on the environment first, because if we focus on behavior and things to do, it doesn't really matter what you create in that space. If the environment doesn't support it, it gets crushed. And so we always have to start with, what do we want to see in the team environment, and then move on to other things. And I think in that space, women bring very unique skill set to the table in creating those interpersonal relationships.
Absolutely. I think just to add on to what you said is when I started a new position at some point, I did ask a mentor at that stage, what should I look at first? Should I just look at the systems and see if I can improve it? And the answer that I was given, I actually take with me everywhere, is the answer was no, go build the relationships first. And then you can start looking at systems. And I think that ties into what you said, is the human factor first, then the non-human factor. Lydia, I think this will be close to your heart as well.
Very much so. And Eric, you summed it up very eloquently there. I love what you said. You know, for me, linking into the emotional part, the emotional intelligence part of what women bring to the table, looking at the spiritual, the personal, the mental, and the emotional quotient, and integrating all of that into the resilience, if you will, that we bring to the table as women in building strong teams is absolutely crucial. You know, and then looking at personality types, we're not all the same. We need to start understanding what is important to the other person and how can I relate to that individual. And that calls for a bit of training and a bit of understanding. Interpersonalities, you spoke about the mental capacity, Eric, and that mental space. And I think part of that is making sure that I know who I am. I know what gets up my nose, what irritates me, and how can I control that? How can I overcome that and mediate that so that I can build a very strong team with people that think differently from what I do? And that is the secret of building high-performance teams, is capitalizing on the strength of each individual and what they bring to the table, yet being able to work together in a team setup. There will be some compromises that we have to make, as long as those compromises are not detrimental to any individual or organizational goal. And so as women, I think we stand very strong in that space of building those high performance teams because we are collaborative. And that is another key word in teamwork, is that collaboration.
Absolutely.
If I may, maybe just add two things that I think really adds to building strong, high-performance teams. And it's this element of really teams building the foundation of trust through mutual vulnerability. And that really speaks to how teams are able to truly make connections on a deeper level and understand each other on a deeply human level. And so for me, that foundation of trust and mutual vulnerability is a key. to really effectively being able to collaborate and work together and work with speed, because there's no longer, the multiple distractions, and you're able to trust each other and really perform in the soccer team philosophy around we trust each other, so we're able to pass the ball and ensure that we're able to reach those goals. The second piece for me that should be present in order for a team to really perform well is this ability to deal conflict and to have the psychological safety to such a level that we are able to address issues with candor. We are freely able to raise issues with one another, and we are effectively empowered to deal it in a way that's candor, and not just being nice and sweep things under the carpet, but we are able to deal issues or conflict quickly and then move on in order to reach our goals. So that mutual vulnerability piece and the psychological safety in dealing challenges and issues or conflict with candor is such an important ingredient to building that high performance teams and culture.
Janine, there's actually a question for you here. I'm going to read it to you. So obviously the person saying good morning to everyone. This question is directed at you. How does one get in touch with whole women? So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are available on all the socials. So whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, please connect with us. Otherwise, you can contact me directly. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn or Instagram as well. Not on Facebook, too young for Facebook, but please contact me on social media as well. Inbox me and I'll give you the connections, and we're able to connect on your journey as women and see how we can empower you through the process. Thank you for the question.
I think again to all our attendees, please, questioning is open. You guys can drop a message anytime. I am looking at them and I'll be reporting them as I can. Dr. Ryan, perhaps I'd like to involve you here. I know that you mentioned that quite a lot of your executives are women. How have they, or how has that shift contributed to your high performing team?
Yeah, actually, one can, what the panel has done in quite a lot of detail now is unpack the attributes that female leaders bring to the team. So maybe just to add a different perspective to that, and that is just to say that diversity in any team brings a perspective that is extremely useful. If you have all the people that look the same, think the same, have the same background, the same hormonal structure, you're always going to tend to gravitate around the same answer. And I think the hallmark of a successful executive conversation is one wherein there are differing views, where you've got a red team who calls out some of the risks and differences, even if they don't necessarily support that, so that you can have a robust argument and ultimately reach a consensus position. Our customers at Discovery Health are 50% women. If we didn't have women in our executive team, we may not be able to relate to those customers or have an understanding of how those customers feel. And so aside from all the attributes that women bring, because one could easily also talk about the attributes that men bring, it's not only a gender difference, it's just the fact that there is a difference. And that diversity in itself makes a team much richer and much more representative of its customer base and of diverse thought. The same argument could be raised about having racial diversity around a team. It brings a very similar dynamic. It makes a team, particularly in a rainbow nation like ours in South Africa, much more able to reflect the views of a varied customer base and a South African population, and not just the views of the prevailing race or gender in the boardroom. And so for me, the diversity in itself is a virtue. Aside from the fact that we're talking about gender attributes.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to contribute to the high performing team topic? Because I do think this is important, and it has to do with all of our businesses as well. Sitembile, perhaps from your side, especially in your role as well, how do you believe women are essential to creating high-performing teams in a company?
I think it's very important that we look into the current statistics of unemployment in the country. Quite disturbing. 51% total population is women. So I think high performance for women, it's one of the things that we should be looking into, because women bring something special to the organization. I mean, I always say that within the organization, when you look at what we are able to do, we move from seriousness of how things needs to be done in the organization, but also bring the human element part of it into the organization. I usually have something called the pulse check with my team, so that I can adequately support them. So during the pulse check, what I do is understand where they are, my team is during that specific week, so that I know how to show up. So to encourage and to make sure that you support them to show up and to perform adequately, you need to understand where they are mentally, emotionally, and sometimes it's a physical thing. So I think these are some of the elements that we look into, but at the same time looking into some of the social and cultural issues that most of the people, that the employees that I deal with, they're dealing with at home. Touched a bit on the issue of unemployment, meaning that you have team members that really requires you to show up differently, given the current situations in the townships and villages. Currently, the lack of employment really move them into a space where, if we're not really supporting them adequately, they sometimes become impacted in the organizations in terms of the work that we expect them to be doing.
Thank you so much. Since we've got, yes.
Sorry, if I may, just linking into the whole conversation here, one of the most important elements that should not be overlooked is training and upskilling, because productivity will always take a back seat if you've got unskilled, semi-skilled, or not well-skilled labor in any particular area. And so, we should never omit looking at the skill level of team members if you want to build high performance teams. And that will start right from entry level into the workforce to boardroom level, to see, where and what is it that we actually need around the table, and am I equipped to fulfill that expectation? So there's a huge training and development aspect that come into play when we start talking high performance teams and building high performance teams as well. Just thought I'd raise that.
Absolutely. I think because we've got about 12 minutes left of our session, I'd like to maybe make our last conversation about AI, the impact that AI could potentially have on women and their jobs. How will it affect the number of women in the workforce? How might it either mitigate or maybe expand the current gap in the corporate leadership pipeline? I myself have been experiencing the impact of AI in our business as well, but obviously with all our industries that differ, it'll be interesting to know, especially from you, Eric, and Dr. Ryan. It would be great to get your insights on this.
I'm happy to start, Eric. It's okay with you?
Go for it.
It's interesting that the research at the moment shows that generative AI is expected to affect women much more so than men. And that's something that I really wasn't cognizant of. But the reason is that 79% of working women are employed in occupations which are likely to be disrupted by AI and by innovation. So actually, if you turn it around, of all the jobs women work in, 11% of those jobs seem to be subject to AI disruption. And if you look at those particular industries, bank tellers, food services, customer services, office support, healthcare services, education, those are services where women tend to have higher employment in those sectors. And those are the precise sectors where AI is becoming an issue. So I would say, in the context of a discussion on women, AI is highly relevant. Of course, in the context of any job discussion at the moment, AI is highly relevant. We're seeing it in our own business. We've deployed machine learning and AI in multiple components of our business. Fortunately, because we're a growing business, we've been able to repurpose jobs, and so we haven't lost a single job to AI, and we've deployed people into other environments. But there's no doubt that some of the roles that we traditionally employed people for have become redundant now. So I think the obligation on employers is to reskill, to be ahead of this disruptive trend, and to have a very clear plan in mind for how you're going to create opportunities for those individuals who may well end up being displaced by AI. I think what is not an option for employers is to go slow on the AI disruption. I think then you'll get left behind on this important technological trend and perhaps lose competitive advantage. So I think it has to be embraced, but in a responsible way where employer needs, and in this case, particularly women's needs, are put at the forefront of that forward-looking thought.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice to business leaders, or, for some of those attending today. Very important to take note of this. Over to you, Eric.
Yeah, I've personally loved the explosion of AI. Like, loved it. It feels to me like I'm now living in the future. Like all the things that I saw as a kid growing up, it feels like all those things are now starting to materialize, and it's been incredible to see it. And what's been fascinating for me is we've obviously seen many different tech hype cycles in the past few years, and the metaverse was a good example. Like we had this massive hype around everyone's going to do all their work in the metaverse, and then of course none of that happened. There was this one conference they organized where they spent millions of dollars to get the conference set up, and they had like 2 people attend, because no one wants to go and party in the metaverse. And so what we had is we had all this tech, but we didn't have a use case for it. And then AI comes along, and it's just like we have an abundance of use cases. You inject AI into almost anything, and it becomes more practical, it becomes more useful. Faster. And so it's been so incredible to see this proliferation of AI. But I think what that has led to for many people is, of course, number one, overwhelm, in terms of we are seeing all of this news about jobs being taken and how it's going to disrupt different industries. Also, the overwhelm of information. I'm subscribed to AI-based newsletters, and I see maybe like between 200 and 400 new tools being released every week. So even if you are obsessed with AI, it's almost impossible to keep up with what's happening in that world. It moves too quickly. And then at the same time, so you have the overwhelm, and then on the other side, you have the FOMO, which is, how do I become a part of this? How do I tap into it? How do I use it in my business? So there's a lot of emotion that comes with this shift that we're seeing from an AI point of view. And it creates a bit of this like sort of fog of AI, like we don't know what to do, where to go. And the best advice I have for people in this point in time is to know that we don't know what the future looks like. It's impossible to know. Like, it's just moving too quickly. There are too many changes. If you look at Midjourney, for example, so Midjourney is the one that generates images. And if you go and Google the changes that happened from Midjourney as it launched to where it is today, I think it's version 5.3, that progression from launch through 5.3 happened in the span of 8 months. And if you look at the progression of how it generated images, it'll blow your mind, the amount of detail and the nuance that it generated over that time. And then you think back to a time when we had, the progression of technology was Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows 2000, right? It was very, very slow. And now things are happening so quickly. We're trying to predict where this is going, but we have no idea. And so what can we do? Well, the only thing we can really do, so there's the employer side of it, which I think Dr. Noach spoke about. And then there's the employee side of it, which is we need to become great at learning. We need to become great at adapting to what's happening around us. So we know this, but it's very difficult to always cultivate the self-awareness and to really know, what does learning look like? How do I make the time to do what I'm supposed to do for the business of today? But how do I also learn about these tools, learn these new skills for what might be required tomorrow? And it doesn't mean that all of us have to become AI experts all of a sudden and learn every single tool that's out there, but it really is about your ability to just rapidly learn new things as we go along. And that's the thing to cultivate. And mainly what that looks like is creating the time. I believe that most people are adaptable. Most people have the ability to move from one thing to the next. What keeps them locked in is their lack of self-awareness, perhaps their lack of self-belief, like we've discussed a little bit today as well, but definitely a lack of prioritization. So I'll just leave it at there for now. I'm going on a bit of a rant.
No, but I think something from your rant stands out is that I think businesses and business leaders need to start looking at including AI training into their upskilling and into their developing, even on small scales. It doesn't have to be major, perhaps, it doesn't have to be 100% related to the industries either, but just some awareness on it and just creating that movement, I think is crucial. I think if businesses are ignoring the fact that this is the direction the world is heading, they're going to fall behind because it is rapidly developing and entering the workforce. I've even seen AI entering the HR workforce, which is something that is becoming very popular now. So yeah,
it's going to be everywhere. And perhaps one of the most important aspects of this is we have to stop this doom and gloom, because what that does is it creates an us versus they mentality. And what we really need is to move into a more collaborative space where we don't fear technology, we don't fear AI, we don't fear our jobs being taken, but we rather have the attitude change. We go, well, how am I going to use this to augment who I am and what I do? And how can I use this to automate some of the stuff that I don't want to do so I can focus on what makes me come alive, where my creativity really lies? And so that also needs to change. It's like, it's us and AI, not us versus AI.
absolutely.
And I think that is so important to identify that, because just going back to the organization for a while, if you look at HR and Kathleen, you brought the HR process into this. If you look at OD and OB processes, it is vital for HR executives to relook at architecture and to say, what is the gap that AI is creating? I mean, it's filling a brand new space, but it's also creating a gap in the workspace right now. And how can we, through a skills audit maybe, or identifying the lack of particular skills, to train people up, to educate, to equip them, either in that specific field or in a different field. And I think that's where Dr. Ryan touched on as well, that they haven't lost one person to AI. They could navigate around that. But that can only happen if your HR is on the ball in identifying this gap and proactively working towards filling that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think, yeah, I echo the same sentiments as everybody that shared. AI and digitization processes or journeys has certainly been very exciting. But we're already seeing this play out in the different workplaces. If I look at my own context and environment, we have seen massive jobs that had to be repurposed into various other future jobs. And it's important that whether we are in corporate SA or we are entrepreneurs running our own businesses, that we are clear on what does this future world look like, future world of work, what are the future skills that will be required, understand where our people are at and where is those gaps, and be deliberate and intentional around creating those learning journeys or learning experiences that will help our people be able to pivot when the time is needed. And really, for me, the magic lies in, are we ahead of the curve and not caught off guard when it happens and really just pushed into a corner where we need to let people go. So we want to really be intentional around that and avoid, instances where we don't need people. We have a responsibility as corporate SA, as entrepreneurs, to make sure that people remain employed and meaningfully so for the future. And the key thing is to bring people along the journey in understanding that the way I'm going to keep my skills relevant is to learn. and ensuring that I understand that learning is part of who I am. And for women, I think we've seen that it has been very difficult because they wear multiple hats and they have more responsibilities. But it's around how do I craft out that space so that I can go through learning experiences and learning journeys and prioritize myself in ensuring that I am, skilled enough so that I can retain, be relevant in the future. So it's a journey. It's absolutely a journey, but it's important that we take people along the journey with us. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have reached the end of our conversation. On behalf of CTU Corporate Training Solutions, I just want to say thank you to each and every panelist who's joined us today. Each of you have contributed immensely to this conversation. I'm sure our attendees have gained a lot of valuable insights and advice here. So thank you to each and every one of you, and enjoy the rest of your days. Yeah, have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.